This is a topic that is growing, and there's interest growing in my field about how we can create food, grow food in a way that's both sustainable to the environment and also good for our bodies. So I wanted to start by asking you guys, what you think the definition of sustainable agriculture is. What do you guys think is the definition? How would you define sustainable agriculture? Or what would a definition of sustainable agriculture include? Yes?
Having enough to eat without harming the environment.
Okay. Enough, we want to produce enough food without harming the environment. What else?
Having food that's more local, so you don't have to transport it all over.
Okay, so producing food locally is a component. Anything else you can think of? Okay, well, I'm going to show you the actual definition of sustainable agriculture. This is written into public law. Sustainable agriculture is an integrated system of plant and animal production practices that have site-specific application that will, over the long term, satisfy human needs. So you guys mentioned provide enough food for humans to get their needs met. Enhance environmental quality. So not just don't destroy the environment, but actually enhance the environment and the natural resource base upon which the economy depends. Then we have efficient use of resources. So we want to efficiently use non-renewable resources and on-farm resources and integrate, where appropriate, natural biological cycles. Integrate natural biological cycles into the way we produce food. Also sustain economic viability of farm operations. Does anybody know why this one's important? What have we seen happen with farms in the U.S. in terms of size? Does anybody know? Do we have more small farms now than we used to, or less? Yeah, it's not very economically viable for many small farms to stay in operation. So we have orchestrated our farm policy to favor the larger farms. So we've seen a decrease in the number of smaller farms, and we're beginning to see a growth in things like urban agriculture that the prior presenter was talking about to try to respond to that. And then lastly, enhance the quality of life for farmers and society as a whole. There's a lot in here. We're satisfying human needs, we're taking care of the environment, we're integrating biological controls, and we're enhancing the quality of life for everyone with sustainable agriculture. Okay, so here's the outline of what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. We're going to start out with looking at a historical view of humans and food. How do humans get food? How have humans gotten food throughout the history of the world? Have we always planted things, or were there some differences? Just as a background to put into perspective the way we're producing food today. Then we're going to talk about some agricultural trends. We'll talk about how the changes in the way we produce food have affected the environment and us. We'll look at the Green Revolution. You guys know what we mean by the Green Revolution? It's the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, etc. to increase production that began in the 1960s. We'll also talk a bit about genetic modification, and we'll talk about how have all these changes affected the safety of our food. You know, guys, last week I was looking through some notes from a meeting I went to in 2005 in New York. It was a meeting of World Hunger Year, and it was funny because I realized that at the time there were all these big names in sustainable agriculture who were there then that I didn't know. I didn't know who they were at the time. Now I read through the list and I'm like, oh, Tom Spalding and George Naylor, they were there. So I had these notes from that meeting, and I noticed that that Tom Spalding was talking about the driving forces behind agriculture and in terms of what we grow. And he said we favor efficiency. Currently, we favor efficiency. And his question to the audience at the time was, does everyone drive a Kia? He said no. Well, he said, well, in the other realms of life, we favor other things than just efficiency. We actually favor safety, and we favor quality rather than just efficiency. So anyway, because of the favoring of efficiency and production, we have some issues that we're currently dealing with. Then we're going to talk about sustainable food. What drives it? What are the driving forces behind looking for more sustainable ways to drive food? We have several driving forces to consider. After that, we're going to talk about the nutrition transition. So how has this change in agriculture affected the health of humans? And then lastly, we're going to look at some of the promising signs that we see being integrated into public policy, federal policy, and then also things happening at the grassroots level. Okay, so let's start with food procurement. Let's look at ways that humans get food. Now, there are still people today who are getting food by all of these methods that are listed under non-industrial societies. So what do we think about as being the way that early humans procured food? How did early humans get food?
Harvested.
Okay, harvesting it, hunting and gathering, right? Are some of the the most primitive methods we think of as humans getting food. So we call this foraging, hunting and gathering, foraging. We began to see humans growing certain foods, horticulture, pastoralism. What is pastoralism? Does anybody know? There you go. That's right. We see a pastoralist here. So people procuring food in areas where crops don't grow so well. Having herds of domesticated animals, drinking their milk, eating the blood of the animal, etc. And then we began to see intensive agriculture, and which progressed into industrialized agriculture in the early 1900s. So let's look at this. Our current system for getting food is actually rather new. Just 50 years ago, if you walked into a grocery store, you would see a lot more seasonal variation than you see today. So if you go to Ralph's in Long Beach, or you go to Kroger in Illinois or Florida or New York, you're going to see basically the same foods there, right? Throughout the year, across the country, you're going to see a very similar set of foods. 50 years ago, that was not the case. So we've seen a huge shift in the way our food is being produced. Okay, hunters and gatherers foraged for food. They were nomadic. They moved to where the food were. And we still see some examples in parts of Africa, for example, where foraging still happens. Basically, in lands that aren't suitable for agriculture, marginal lands, the desert fringes of Australia, southern Africa, etc., we see people still foraging for food. And the challenge here is to find enough food without exploiting nature. So these people tend to be nomadic. The next system we see here is horticulture. So horticulturists use non-mechanized food production. So they're cultivating plants, they're growing things, but they're using systems that allow more of the biological cycles to occur in the production of food. So, for example, forest land may be cut down and burned to remove vegetation and leave ash behind that enriches the soil, and then crops are planted for 1 to 3 years, and then the land is abandoned and allowed to return back to forest. So the challenge we see among horticulturists is that they tend to eat a lot of starchy foods, starchy staple foods, without a lot of protein in the diet. We see this in the rainforests of South America, Central America, still today, and in Africa. The next method we see, you guys identified as pastoralism. So pastoralists depend on large herds of domesticated animals. So the challenge here is the opposite of the horticulturist challenge. It's to find starchy crops to supplement the animal products. Interestingly, I've seen articles, not necessarily research articles, but things in the news, using the Maasai of Africa as an example of a population group that eats a diet that's very high in saturated fat. And they try to use that argument to say that saturated fat's not so bad for you, because there's very little cardiovascular disease among the Maasai of Africa. What do you guys think might be different about the Maasai of Africa versus the average American?
They walk a lot.
Yes, there's a lot of activity involved in the lifestyle. So yes, they're drinking whole milk, they're consuming blood from the animal products, having a diet that's high in saturated fat and cholesterol, but they also have large blood vessels that are attributed to their exercise.
Would it also have something to do with, the type of diet that the animals here.
Sure.
They, you know, they need to clean